Welcome, petals. If your life revolves around flowers, this is the podcast for you. So you've always wanted to be a flower farmer, but what do you actually need to get started? A common question without a simple answer. But in this episode, my guest and I are breaking down what we think is needed. So if you're thinking about turning flowers into an income, or even if you just want to see if you agree with us, do keep listening.
You've got to be brave. You've actually got to be brave enough to go out and talk to somebody to start with. You actually have to, as they say, put on your big girl panties and go and talk to someone.
Before we dive in, we welcome Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers as our Season 3 sponsor. Blooming in New Zealand since 1992, they're a vibrant modern wholesale business, bringing premium hand-selected blooms to florists and retailers nationwide. Let's get into it by welcoming my guest, Penelope from Martinborough Manor in Martinborough. Welcome, Penelope.
Good morning and thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Martinborough Manor. What do you have going on at the manor?
We have an awful lot going on at Martinborough Manor, an awful lot, from donkeys to guinea pigs and then the flowers as well. I wanted to be a flower farmer since I was 21, which is, a few years ago now. And it's only been since about 2017, 18 that we actually got into it and started the flower farm.
It's amazing, isn't it, how we all progress towards it. For us, it wasn't a simple jump either. I was a landscaper before I was a flower farmer. So there's always a progression. Or for the people who have been in it the long term, I think there's always been a progression. It's just not a let's flower farm and start. And I think that's important. And it actually leads into our first point, which I think it's really important that people do start small.
Absolutely. We started incredibly small. And in fact, we did a textbook start, if you like, for the flower farming part of our business. We were asked to grow flowers for a shop in town.
Oh.
So we knew before we planted a single seed where our flowers were going to go in the first instance. But
That is amazing.
Yes, it's how you're supposed to do it. But so we did indeed start very small. We started with zinnias in what had been a paddock because that's what the owner of the shop wanted. And then we sort of moved on from there and gradually added more, some of which was successful, some of which not, but that's all part of the learning. So yes, we started small, but now we're quite large.
Do you remember just off the top of your head what kind of area of land or growing meters that you started with?
The area that we first started planting in was about 1/4 of an acre, but we didn't use all of that by any means. That was just what was fenced off from the animals. And we started with a very short row of zinnias.
You started with just the zinnias. Do you agree that you should start with a fewer number of varieties? Even if you do different colours of the same variety, start with only a few varieties to learn how to grow those?
I think yes. I mean, I've been growing for way too many years to say. And so I thought I knew how to grow flowers. But growing them to sell them is such a different thing from growing to, have them in your garden or to bring them inside. So there was so much to learn. And really and truly, I had absolutely no clue about flower farming at that stage. And, there was no foliage, no fluffies, no anything. But it did give us a start into, well, to sell, then you have to have enough to sell. That was a very good start, and I'm glad I didn't start bigger.
So my advice to people is always to think about dividing their growing area into seasons for growing, like spring for us in Central Otago, spring, early summer, late summer. For you, with your climate in Martinborough, is so different from ours, really. Particularly your microclimate is incredible, but
Yes.
we can't really succession plant in the way that other people can. But if they do a spring crop and then an early summer and a late summer, the spring beds can be empty to put the late summer crop into. So they only need 2/3 of the amount of land that they think they needed to start with. So if you're only doing 3 bins of flowers, you actually probably only need 2 and you can swap them around. It's a translatable size model that I think works to get people's mind around how to plant.
definitely scalable with that mindset. And that's what we did. We scaled from nothing and scaled up. But if you start small, that's right, you can go bigger. If you start large, going small is not the same logic.
Well, it's kind of defeatist, isn't it? For me, I would struggle with that psychologically to downsize because I would feel like I had failed in those beds. My way around that now is just to take out the annuals and put perennials and shrubs in, and they take up the space. But we'll pretend that that's deliberate plan, not that I'm downscaling.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So if you were talking to a new grower yourself, what kind of land area would you recommend that they start with?
For someone who is starting out, if they have a quarter-acre section with a house and a garage and a clothesline, whatever, then if you are organised, then yes, you can grow a significant number of flowers in that space.
I agree with that. It's about making the best use of the space that you have. And again, it comes back to that scalable model. And I suppose also whether you're planting in raised beds or bins or in the ground, those things all make a difference as well to how well you can use that space.
Yes, definitely. And we did start planting straight into the ground, which was paddock. And we did learn from that the paddock grows again through the flowers. And so we did move to flowerings in raised beds. So it was a control thing for us. And once we got bigger, we had to do raised beds just to keep control of things.
So why do you think raised beds help you to keep control of things? Because this leads on to our next question about infrastructure, and are raised beds better than planting in ground? What made you go to raised beds apart from weed control?
The paddock. This was an ex-beef farm, and so a lot of the ground was very compacted. And I mean, at the moment we're planting into what has been our own pig paddock, and it's so hard to plant into concrete, so to speak. For us, neither of us are getting any younger, and psychologically I can say, I'm just going out to weed, and when I weed a bed, because the soil is so good in that bed, because we have created, I can weed a bed and then think, I may as well weed another one, and it's fine. I do a lot of other things apart from flower farming, so it helps me with my workload. And the same with planting. We'll just decide to plant a couple of beds before lunch or whatever, and then it's done.
Yeah, it just puts a time frame and an energy frame on the work that you're trying to do in the time that you've got to do it.
Yes, It does.
Love the growing, but over the constant hustle for buyers? Our partners at Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers can help with that. Juggling dozens of tiny retail accounts or losing your weekends selling at the local market takes time and energy. By partnering with Fresh Cut, you get instant access to florists and supermarkets nationwide. Selling wholesale means a reliable income, and the best part, you get your time back. Simplify your business and focus on what you do best, growing gorgeous blooms. There's excitement ahead with big ideas blooming, but why not visit Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers at wholesaleflowers.nz to see how easy it is to become a supplier. Fresh Cut, established in 1992, evolving for tomorrow. Now back to the show. Okay, so we were talking about infrastructure and raised beds, and I know you've got irrigation within your beds, don't you? Do you have Weedmat in your beds as well?
No, but as we speak, yes, we're about to put weed matting down because we're just finding with all the beds that we have, the weed pressure is too much. So this is going to be our first try with weed matting, probably tomorrow.
And that's within the beds or in the pathways?
The pathways have been weed matted, if that's the right word, for almost all the time, but in the beds starting soon.
Okay. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because we're removing some of our weed mat from the beds. We just don't think enough moisture gets to the plants, and it just stifles some of the soil health. But I understand completely where you're coming from. It's so frustrating having so much weeding to do. Have you thought about using the wool weed mat? Have you talked to anyone who's used that?
No, I think that's a pricey option, but it may come to that. We have used wool itself in our vegetable beds, and that does work, but that we found kept some of the moisture off the soil too.
Of course, because you water above soil, don't you? Whereas we
Yes.
water on the soil.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So irrigation is another complete topic. We're not even going to go there
No,
today because
not
I
today.
want to cover that with an irrigation specialist because everyone's needs are different. But I will just say, as a new grower, you need to think about whether you can do irrigation, whether you have water available.
Very much so, especially if you live in town.
Yeah, the cost of that, yeah, is high. We'll go back a bit for people who are needing to learn about flower farming. Best books, what would you suggest?
Even for somebody like me that's now been flower farming for some years, the Alan Armitage books, both of his books are excellent, and I use them all the time, both the sort of condensed version and the full version. The Lisa Mason-Ziegler book on cauliflowers, I bought that. I also have the Flower Farming for Profit book by Lenny Larkin and a lot of others. It's a bit like flower farming allows you to buy books. Yes.
It does, it does. And your teacher is showing with you liking Alan Armitage books because his are more of a textbook, aren't they?
One of them is his original one with the purple flowers on the cover. That is much more of a textbook, yes. But his later version is not.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, what we need. And I will say that you're right, buying books is a little bit of a habit, but libraries are great, and some of them do have some good books. They tend to have books like the Florette books, the coffee table books, rather than the factual books, which I find just a bit frustrating. And when you read a book, you need to know where that grower is growing. Because Lisa Mason-Ziegler is a fantastic grower, but her conditions are so incredibly different from mine that I couldn't follow her advice. It just doesn't make any sense in my climate. I don't know whether it does for you. You can probably do as many successions as she can, but we can't. So it's very different, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And you're right. I know Central Otago, as you know, we lived there, but I can do a lot of successions, a lot.
So that's something else you need to learn, whether you can get a crop planted and harvested, the bed ripped out and another crop go in, which is what a succession is, so that you're using each bed more than once in a season. That's what succession planting is. And we should have explained that first to new growers. I apologise that we went straight into it. But when you know your topic, it's kind of hard to go back to basics. The tools needed by a new grower. Seed starting tools, what's your recommendation?
I just used 6 packs to start with, leftover 6 packs that I had retrieved from our own plantings. I then bought flat trays because I needed more per planting. I do use 50 cell trays that I have a limited number of for some things like sweet peas and sunflowers, where they need a bit more
perennials.
Space. And perennials.
The 50s are good for perennials.
Indeed they are. Yes, I have some of those tucked away as well. But for starting out, then, the 6-pack size of cell is fine. Absolutely fine.
Have you tried soil blocking?
I have a soil blocker, yes. And once I found where I'd put it carefully... No, I haven't tried it. Since my accident, my wrists are somewhat useless. But I do have it, and I do intend to use it at some stage or hire Bill to do it.
I think Mr. Martinborough Manor would have to do that because I find that even without having the injuries that you've had on your hands and wrists. So I would recommend that Bill do that one for you to start with, see how you go.
In theory, it's great, yes.
In theory, it is. I think that a lot of flower farmers, particularly in the UK and the US, who have access to soil blockers at a reasonable price, use soil blockers. And Sarah from Bloom and Grey has come up with some designs for soil blockers which are more suitable for bulk planting.
Yes.
But they are pricey. They are really pricey. I won't be going there. I can't justify that. It's better for me to buy trays than to go for that price, much as I don't want to with the plastic. It's just an economic decision. So, think about soil blocking, but start with maybe one from Active Vista in Australia, or even a Temu one. I've heard of people who have used a Temu one and they were fine. I don't know anything about them. I don't buy from Temu on principle. But if that's what your budget allows, go for it. Try it. See if it works for you as a new grower. Do you use heat mats and lights?
I have used a heat mat once. I have one. I was given one, I think. So I used it once when I was trying to plant some Himalayan blue poppies.
Okay.
And I used them and they germinated, and then I forgot to water them, so they died. My decision to use them for that was they were very, very expensive seeds, and so I needed to make sure they did germinate. I don't use them, and I don't have lights either. Most of our seed germination is done in a polycarbonate tunnel, small one, just 2.4 by 2.4, and that gives them enough light and enough warmth to germinate in there.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I don't think there's any need for fancy heat mats and lights unless you are starting your seeds somewhere cold and dark. And that's going to cause you so many issues because you'll get more fungus gnats, you'll get more mold on the top of your seed trays or soil blocks or whatever. If you've got somewhere small that is warm, relatively dry and well lit, I think you're better off with doing that. And it can just be a home-built plastic glass house is the wrong word because it's not glass, greenhouse. But you know, the Sistema boxes that you buy from the Big Red Shed, that's a greenhouse in itself if you put a lid on it. So you don't have to spend a huge amount of money to start your seeds. And as a new grower, I would suggest finding a cheap, effective way rather than spending big money.
Yes, actually, you remind me, we did have half a dozen big Sistema boxes one year to do seedlings in. Still in the trays, yes.
But you can get the ones that aren't too deep and the ones that are taller, so whatever suits you or suits your crop. I will just say the taller ones I think are better because they allow for more airflow, so I just think that works better. We actually have a germination chamber here to help with seeds starting, just made out of an old fridge, but you don't need that. Again, a Sistema box for most people will do a pretty good job. The only other thing I would say about seed starting, and I don't know what you use here, is the watering for seeds is quite different.
Yes, indeed. Once our seeds have germinated and they're a bit taller, we remove them to one of our tunnel houses where it has overhead misting. But while they're little tiny things, or before they've germinated, I am just using a hose with a standard adjustable head on it. So I can blast them out if I forget and don't adjust it, or I can just use the mist. And I tend to stand in the doorway so that I'm not applying too much water pressure, and I just whiz round and then I'm done.
I think you're right with that phrase. It's applying too much water pressure, isn't it? It's making sure it's the gentlest fall of rain, or have them on solid trays and water from below, which is what you need to do with soil blocks. That's definitely from below, not above.
Yes.
You just need to think they're small, gentle things, and you treat them with care by applying the least pressure with your hose if you can. All right, so we've got the seeds. We're going out into the field to plant. What's your favourite planting tool?
We have a dibber, and Bill...
As in a stick?
No, actually a bought dibber, a proper one. One of them's blue because then you can't lose it in the field.
Top tip.
Yeah, and the way we do it is that Bill makes the holes in the ground because then he can't complain they're not in straight rows. And I take the seedlings out of the tray, whatever kind of tray they are in, and then together we pop them in the hole. So that's for planting. For weeding, Bill is very good, and again, I can't do it, but he uses a Niwashi thing.
I love my Niwashi.
We call it a choppy chop. And he can clear a bed very, very quickly using one of those. And we did buy the longer one on our handles to see if I could use that. Yeah, but I can't. It's just my lack of wrist action, whereas he whizzes along and goes choppy. And clears very well. Obviously a trowel.
Have you ever used an auger on a drill?
We did when we were planting into paddocks, and we have poplar trees, and hitting a root or even a stone is enough to dislocate your shoulders. And so, no, we don't use those anymore. We do have a couple of sizes of them, but no, they were just too dangerous, if you like, in our soil.
I will say that I love the idea of the auger on the drill, and we did use it for planting lots of bulbs. It was a lot easier. But as the auger turns, it actually compresses the soil at the side of the hole.
Yes.
Yeah, so it works as long as you can make a hole big enough that you can then loosen it to plant your seedling. I've gone back to a trowel. I actually have a favourite planting knife, and it's just a wide-bladed knife that I had broken in the kitchen. James took the tip off it. James is Mr. Scrubby Gully. And it just gives me a flat edge to dig into the ground, pull back, put my seedling plug in, and there we go. It's done and dusted. And I find that easier than a trowel because it's smaller. It fits in my pouch that I wear.
Yes.
Which is another top tip, have a pouch.
Yes, have a pouch. Yes.
You've got to have, well, my stretchy belt actually has 2 pouches on it, one for my cell phone, and it's a 2-pocket one. So on one side of that single pouch is my cell phone, my plant tags, and a garden pen, and the other side is just my snips. And I might look stupid wearing these holsters, but my gosh, it saves time and energy.
It does.
Yeah.
And as you get older and you forget where you put things, it's so much easier. They're in your pouch.
You know where they are. But it's also when you come inside, you take your belt off and all your tools are in one place and you put the whole pouch away.
I hadn't thought of that.
For me, that's just a time saver. Mr. Martinborough Manor is keen on his Niwashi, as am I. Have you used a hori knife? Cat from Electric Blooms.
Yes, I have one of those and I do use it. But as Bill does most of the weeding and things, I don't have the need to use it most of the time. But I do have one,
I'm curious to know, because there's 2 sizes of a hori knife, one's longer than the other. I've never bought one because it was too long to fit in my famous pouch that I can't do without. And I just thought it would be a pain to have something else on the belt that was longer.
I think, yes, it does have an adjustment that you can put the belt through, or put my belt through anyway. But no, I've never put it on it. I just carry it. Yeah. That's one thing I do carry.
Okay. Yeah, and that would be annoying for me. I would put it down and I'd never find it again.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. Why don't they paint every tool bright orange, or I don't know what kind, even if they were white, you'd find them more. But wooden handles, you never find them again. They're gone. No. They're in the compost bin and you never get them back. It's so annoying.
It is. But even so, with the orange-handled flower snips that I have, Bill found a pair yesterday out in one of the fields that I had misplaced. I couldn't see it for looking. And it's orange, orange.
Yeah, that leads on to a perfect next step, harvesting. You use snips, not secateurs?
I use snips and they're simply mitre 10 orange ones, but I do have secateurs for when I need to cut woodies because sometimes the stems are a bit tough on my snips.
I agree 100%. I mean, good secateurs for heavier stuff, but the lighter weight snips that you can access, and we get ours through farmlands. The snips we buy, I think, are $16 each. They're not expensive. Mr. Scrubby Gully does have to resharpen them and take the burrs out when I hit a stone, but that's possible for them to do. It's the fact that they're lightweight, it makes it so much easier. And you'd notice this with your
on my
hands.
Yes.
That would be so hard. I don't understand people who harvest with secateurs.
No.
I just don't understand it. It's so hard on the body.
Snips are pointy too, so you can get in a V shape on a stem if you need to. And yes, snips, but have secateurs as backups.
And do you harvest into water or do you harvest dry?
When I'm picking a lot, I harvest into water. If I'm accidentally just having to go out and harvest a bouquet, then no, just dry.
Dry, yeah. And do you use the square buckets?
I do, yeah.
I will say that, and I don't know, how do you then get your buckets from your field to wherever your studio, your cool store, because you run a cool store the same as us, how do you transport from the field to the cool store?
When I started, I carried one at a time, but Bill took the cutting deck off our old lawn tractor. And we had a trolley that you could adjust the handle to use this grandma's green tractor to pull the trolley that then holds the buckets. And we can get around. If you go a certain route, you can get around quite efficiently and come out and then go to the chiller.
And that makes such a difference. And I know it's probably a bit daunting for new growers to be thinking about ride-on mowers being turned into tractors and trailers and chillers and that. Even if you're starting, you need to look after your body, and having some way of transporting your buckets is important. We started out with just hand-pulled trolleys from
Mitre 10.
trade-tested, Mitre 10, we had one of those.
We did too.
But be aware that some of those have angled sides, and you can't fit as many buckets, and the buckets fall over more easily. I would say square buckets, a trolley with square sides, and then progress from there as you have more and more. But yeah, definitely a trolley. Don't go lifting heavy buckets, even with the minimum water in your buckets. They're heavy. And if you're doing more than one bucket, it's daft. Think about your body now and save it for the future. One thing that Kat from Electric Blooms also told me was that she was given a trolley, a harvesting seat, I think she called it, that she could sit on for when she harvested. Our ground's too stony for that, but I love the idea. It's sitting down to do your harvest is quite cool.
In time.
By the time I get it, it'll be a wheelchair. So have you done some flower farming courses?
Yes, before it was a flower farming course, I did Charlotte Smith's Farm Marketing from the Heart one, I think.
Okay.
And that was actually where I met Laurie Jo Hernandez from 3 Acre Farm. And I did her course, and that was a specific flower farming course, whereas Charlotte's was not. But once I started to do Laurie Jo's course, I really started to learn about flower farming and planning and creating bouquets rather than just having a bed of zinnias growing.
Do you think Laurie Jo's course translates well to new growers from New Zealand?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, I found it very useful. And things like her recipes and her colour guides and all sorts of things were very, very, very useful for a very early flower farmer. Yes.
I did the Lisa Mason-Ziegler course and then some of Dave Dowling's. And there was lots to learn, and Lisa's was good, but her growing advice wasn't relevant to me. Her thoughts about planning and selling were good. But just the growing advice wasn't right for my conditions here. And it's not a course as such, but an advice panel, an advice group that people can join, of course, is the Floral Business Activator, which Penelope and I are both a part of. It's a New Zealand group, and we'll be talking to Julie from the FBA, as we fondly call it, in a later episode of the podcast. So keep an eye out for anything about the Floral Business Activator.
And in fact, that's where we met.
Yeah, and then we started talking Korean natural farming, and it went from there.
Yes. You made me buy that book, yes.
It was my fault. I can cope with that. Korean natural farming is a huge rabbit hole to go through, but it's all about being able to make your own fertilisers and pest control solutions from material you have on your own farm. Again, that's another whole episode. This would be a bit overwhelming to get into that for new growers. But one thing I do think that new growers need to think about is understanding their costs. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. And because I'm a spreadsheet type of person, when I'm buying in seedlings particularly, I can easily work out what each seedling costs. So I have that in a spreadsheet, and then I know the starting point for costing my products. Very, very basic. And if for the ones I plant myself, which is now increasing again, I can just equate them to that, and it's ballpark figure. And so that's the basis of that for costing my things.
And do you use an accounting program to keep track of your business expenses?
Yes, we've used Xero for quite a long time, but to start with, I just used a spreadsheet, and when I was sending out invoices, I did it from the spreadsheet, and I set them up so they were linked, but you don't need to set them up so they're linked. I used that for several years because I was using it for our preserving business first. You do need something to keep records, yes.
And I think you need professional advice to help you choose how you should do it. I mean, we use Xero as well, and I love it because it's such a time saver when it comes to GST and things like that. But I think for the price that you would pay for a consult with an accountant or an accountant's assistant even, just to set you on the right track, to keep a good eye on your expenses and understand your overheads, There are so many overheads involved in flower farming that people just ignore, and I think that's the road to losses, not profit,
Downfall.
if you don't think about all of your costs. So
Mm.
my main tip on that one, I'm not going to particularly extol Xero because it's become way more expensive, but I am saying get advice from someone who knows an awful lot more than your sister-in-law or your neighbour next door. Talk to someone who knows how to set up your costs from the beginning.
Yes. We saw an accountant with our earlier business. We saw an accountant and it was money well spent.
The thing about being in a business is you don't just grow, you sell. What bit of advice would you give to a new grower about how they should sell their flowers?
You've got to be brave. You've actually got to be brave enough to go out and talk to somebody to start with. And advertising on social media without any kind of relationship first is not going to help. You actually have to, as they say, put on your big girl panties and go and talk to someone, even if it's at a farmer's market where you can talk to people. You have to do it.
I agree with that one as well. And I think people need to realise there's a huge amount of psychology involved in selling. So you need to understand your personality. If you're an introvert, don't plan on selling at the farmer's market. If you're an extrovert, you can probably do all the social media things and you can probably do the farmer's market. But also it comes down to, it's not just your personality, it's how you find the time to sell what you've grown.
Yes, indeed. And because I work a lot of the time, not off farm, because I work from home on the farm, but our first sales channel is through a retail outlet for somebody else, which means I can sell as we are sitting here.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it, isn't it? Someone else is doing the work or being your shop front, even if they're not doing the work.
Yes, that's right.
They are your shop front, which works for some. You do need to be aware of what type of retail outlet you're selling, because if it's a cafe, it's probably really warm and your flowers aren't going to last particularly long. So you do need to be aware of that. Choose somewhere where your flowers can be kept cool and the staff will look after them.
Very important.
My dream would be to have a wholesaler somewhere close by that I could just drop them off at the wholesaler and they were all gone, because then I could grow a lot more. You get less money for your flowers selling wholesale, but you have to spend less time doing it. So the value of your time comes into the finished dollars equation.
That's right. And you can sell more in a shorter time for less, but the maths works out in your favour.
So tell us a little bit about the famous Martinborough Manor seed starting spreadsheet. Tell us how that works.
Then I'll have to admit to being a bit of a spreadsheet nerd, because in my other life I'm a maths teacher, so I'm not autistic at all. I have a fairly logical, in one department, brain. And so for years and years during my early days, I had a diary. I wrote everything in a diary and I planned and what I was going to plant coming up. And then I did attend a kind of a course and they did have spreadsheets, but there were significant errors in their spreadsheets. So I did start from a basis of some bought-in spreadsheets. But I've added to those and I have rearranged some and I've made videos on how to use them because not everybody knows how to use a spreadsheet. And so now I have not just a spreadsheet, I have a series of spreadsheets all connected in the one course along with the videos so that you can make it yours, because the way it works is there's a particular cell and in that cell you just need to enter your frost date information. That's it. And then it automatically adjusts for people like you and people now that, like me, living in Martinborough, where it's completely different. And there's even a section on what to do if you don't have frosts, because some lucky people...
What?
I know.
Like that?
I know, apparently so. I had somebody ask me quite early on, but what do? I don't have frosts. So I sorted that out. And once you've put in your your date, then it just, as I said, it populates everything, and you can choose to do all the successions. As you mentioned earlier, not everybody's going to be able to get in all the successions that I can do. But having kept records over the years of our own plantings, we know that we can push it most years to the limit. And then there's a vegetable section as well.
So a bit more detail on that then, because I'm trying to envisage it in my brain and can't bring it up on my computer while I'm talking to you.
No,
but
me neither.
You've got the frost date goes in. Is there a series of plants already populated?
The plants are populated in there. Somebody once asked me if they could add some more, and I said, yeah, sure, go ahead. But you do need to know a bit about formulas to add some things there. It's the workhorses that are in there already. Not so many of the fancy things, but the workhorses that you would need.
So what kind of information can a grower pull from that? Can they pull like a list of plants or seeds that need to be started on a particular week, or
Yes.
How does it work?
Right. There's a spreadsheet that has the information on plants, and that spreadsheet does feed into the other spreadsheets, but in itself it has a lot of information on spacing, how many of this plant you can get in a square metre, or if your beds are 1.2 metres wide, how many you can plant there.
That's cool info.
Yes, there's a column so that I have filled in the average number of stems for a plant. And so if you have 100 of them, then you can work out how many stems.
It should be what you can harvest. Yeah.
Yes, and then there's a column for you that's already set up with a formula in it, so that all you have to do is add your price, or what you're going to sell that for. So you can kind of see the amount of money that you could get for 100 of those, provided they averagely flower.
Yeah.
There's soil germination temperatures if you really want to get fancy. There's days from putting the seed in to when you can expect to see the little green tips coming through. There's also days to harvesting, but there's also a spreadsheet that goes in reverse, so that if you want to have flowers for example, Mother's Day, if the weather doesn't get in the road, you can look backwards in the spreadsheet without doing anything to then say, well, I want flowers on the 10th of May. I need to plant them then. It's all in the one place. Yes.
And you've got videos there as well to show people how to use it.
Yes, and how, if you break it, how to fix it.
Were you directing that at me, Penelope?
Not
I
at
don't
all.
break everything.
No, not at all. No, for the number of people I've had to say, Control Z undoes your life.
That's what I've got Mr. Scrubby Gully for too.
Yes.
So where can people find your spreadsheet, and what's the cost of them buying that?
They can find it on our website, Martinborough Manor, spelled MANOR. They can find it there, and at the moment it's $50 for the lot.
I will put a link to that in the show notes for people that want it, because I think for a new grower, that's $50 well spent.
It summarises my early life. Well, my early life as a flower farmer.
But on a spreadsheet, because you're a maths teacher.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Sorry, I know Bill likes straight lines, but I can see you out there with your spreadsheet saying, but no, Bill, it needs to move because it's not meeting up with my spreadsheet requirements.
I don't do straight lines. He says I cannot do a straight line, and we have quite a few discussions on what a straight line is.
Okay, so Martinborough Manors are the place to go to find that spreadsheet. Going back, what's one thing you'd do differently?
It's hard to separate from what I know now from what I knew then. I possibly would plant more greenery to start with. It's been a while since I've got to the sort of place where I know that I need foliage. So I would have planted that earlier had I known.
But that's because you do a lot of bouquets for the retail shop, isn't it?
Yes, that's true.
And if you are selling wholesale, you may not need to do that. So it's interesting, isn't it? But that's what you'd do differently. And I have to say, I'm the same. I would have planted a lot more shrubs a lot sooner. You know, what do they say? The best time to plant a tree is yesterday.
Yes, absolutely. So we're doing that now. I mean, we do have a lot of natives, but some natives don't last in the vase.
That's right. It's actually a really good point when you say that some natives don't last. New growers need to realise that just because it's grown in the garden doesn't mean it will do well in a vase.
Yes.
And there's lots of people that will tell you it will be fine.
The other thing too about new growers, and because it grows in the garden, there are special varieties of flowers, cut flowers that grow longer, like the difference between big box shops ranunculus and the sorts that we would plant where the stems are just longer.
Or the little celosia and the tall celosia and all those kind of things.
Yes, which you learn, or I learned, but it's something if you're actually aware of at the start, it does make your journey faster.
And easier on the soul and the wallet.
That too.
All right, next question. What's working really well for you right now?
Actually being able to buy in seedlings, it's been a lifesaver to move to buying in seedlings. My health was such that I just couldn't do it for those middle years, but now I am going back to planting more myself rather than buying in seedlings. But it has allowed us to scale up significantly faster than we could have done on our own, especially given the hours that I work. But what I get is the workhorse varieties, and I'm now planting more perennials, that's separate, but I'm also planting more of the different kinds of seeds and making inroads on my seed stash, which I bought to start with. Yeah.
Okay, we need to talk about new growers and the seed stash, don't we?
Yes. Don't.
And that's really mean to say that, because I have an A4 file box full of seeds. So I am the world's worst. They are sorted.
I have two of the very large size Mitre 10, not Systema, way bigger than Mitre 10 size. Okay, they're not filled to the top. They've got boxes inside them. But I probably could go into business selling seeds. But yeah.
I think a top tip I heard from somebody, I think it was Christy in the FBA, and she said, grow 10 varieties of plants. And I think that makes sense because you can do different colours within those 10 varieties. So, you could have ranunculus and have 4 colours, or you could have spring stock and have 4 colours. So you've got plenty of variety, but you're learning to grow fewer things at one time. So it just makes sense. I've never been that disciplined. It's just not the way my brain works. And I have to blame Egmont Seeds for that too, because they put up pretty pictures and then I want to try things, and it's unfair of them. There you go, Sandy at Egmont Seeds.
Yes, it is very unfair, and their photographs are absolutely stunning and their descriptions are perfect.
But then social media has an impact on that too, doesn't it? And you see people post bouquets of beautiful flowers and you think, well, I want that, that and that. And then after you've tried growing them, you realise, well, actually, they were in a different zone from me and they have completely different climates to I do, and there's no way I could ever get those things to grow. So,
and also again, different customers. I put in, I think, 600 cocoa marigolds this year, the orange ones, and they were stunning. They were absolutely stunning. And down here, nobody wanted them.
Isn't it interesting? Because talking to both Melanie from The Wild Rose and Mike from Hoo Hoo Gardens, they were their stalwarts. That's what did really well for them. And Melanie sells to her florist shop and Mike sells wholesale. And they were both moving a ton. I couldn't sell them here. I couldn't give them away here.
No, I couldn't either.
It would not work.
No, I had to sneak them into bouquets that were bought online that, they didn't know they were coming. But certainly in the retail outlet, they were the ones that just did not sell. This year, I've changed from cocoa, the orange one, to moving to the white swan.
I dislike it. For us, it didn't work. It was the colour. The colour didn't work in our climate. Yeah.
I'm sure it would work better here than the orange one.
Yeah.
But I'm giving it a go to see if it works better here, because they certainly grow here. And as Bill keeps saying, we are going to be able to grow them forever because they self-seeded magnificently because I wasn't picking them.
Did they revert back to first generation or were they?
No. Though, interestingly, we've put a bed in out by our gate, which is under the neighbour's pine trees. And I have the most exquisite, virtually fingernail size marigold flowers. But I think that's more to do with the pine trees than anything else. But no, they've just been amazing. And they just come up and they're orange and they're big and they're strong and unloved.
Why is it the things that grow really well, like weeds, are unloved?
My Lysianthus that's one of this season's failures. They just don't. They don't do anything. They don't flush.
I know we're deviating again. It's just there's always so much to talk about. But your Lysianthus were obviously in your flower beds, or were they in one of your tunnels?
Both. We had some inside and some in the tunnels. And unfortunately, it's the last planting that is planted outside.
Yeah.
Which means it's going to be later and slower and may just get itself pulled out anyway.
Yeah.
But the ones in the tunnels, the successions that we planted in the tunnels, I mean, I can pick single stems, but not like Florette with the, the armful over the shoulder.
Yeah,
no.
I know.
No,
yeah, I know. But
not that.
No, I couldn't sell a single one of my Lysianthus stems. Not one.
Right. I have sold all that I've picked.
Well, we deviate a lot, don't we? I had this list of questions I was going to ask you, and we've gone everywhere else, but that doesn't matter. Last question for you. What should people stop doing?
Stop comparing themselves to others.
Yes, that is exactly what I would have said. Exactly. Yeah.
And it's magnified by social media.
Mm.
I had another grower come and visit me. She's local. Well, not local, she's about an hour away. But anyway, she came to visit me one day to buy some flowers. And she just got out of the car and said, "Oh, how's it going?" And I said, "Oh, great." And she said, "Is that an Instagram answer or is that a real answer?" And that's it, isn't it? It's an Instagram answer or an Instagram photograph.
Yes.
And it's not real life.
And I think that that's a really, really important thing for new growers to take on board. Just because you want a perfect looking flower farm doesn't mean you'll get one. And Kat from Electric Blooms, when I asked her what advice that she would get, I'm going to actually read what she said because I think she summed it up beautifully. She said, the important thing for her was knowing her limits, learning to ruthlessly prioritise by urgency or importance, and letting go of perfectionism. Isn't that cool? That is so right.
Yes.
That's the perfectionism is the Instagram drive, I think, but being able to ruthlessly prioritise is such a skill.
Absolutely. And when I first started, I did not have that skill. I would leave the plants because, they've got buds. They might just come out. And so I wouldn't pull out the plants. So I had no room to succession plant. But now it's, you're done, out. And there'll be another one along soon.
Yes. Yeah, get that one out because it's not worth my time to go looking for flowers when I can rip this bed out and put new plants in to get another succession of fresh, healthy looking plants.
Definitely.
All right, we'll finish off with one final bit of advice from you for new growers. What would you tell someone who turned up to your place today and said, I want to start a flower farm?
I would have to ask them probably if they knew where they were going to sell, because I do think that is important. And being such an expert at that in the first place. But I would also ask them if they knew their growing conditions, because even where we are in Martinborough, it is very different from, well, we talk about it on the other side of the golf course. What do they call it? Peri-urban. So town is just on the other side of the golf course from us. And the weather patterns there are entirely different from what happens at our place. And so people do need to know where the wind comes from mostly.
Yep.
Their rain, their water. So do they know the conditions of where they are going to grow or where they intend to grow their flowers?
Penelope, it's been brilliant talking to you, and I think you're 100% correct in what you've summed up with then with new growers. Know where you're going to sell, know your growing conditions, and then buy the spreadsheet from Martinborough Manor to know when to plant your seeds. You should have had that in there.
I should have.
That's your marketing.
Okay. Yeah. That's right.
Thank you. That is fantastic.
It's been a pleasure, Jo. Thank you.
To stay in the loop, follow Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers on Instagram. Even with big changes coming to their website, their Insta feed is a place for behind-the-scenes looks and a sneak peek of what's blooming next. Fresh Cut Flower Wholesalers, established in 1992, evolving for tomorrow. That's it for this episode, Petals. I'm Jo Robinson and I'm signing off until next time, knowing that if we work together, we'll keep the New Zealand floral industry growing and flourishing.